How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast, episode 129. We're going to be talking about equity, cash flow, and active income. And the best part is that we're going to be giving three different situations of three different people, and we're going to be breaking down exactly what their strategies could be or should be based on their situation in life. So, before we hop into it, this is the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast. My name is Chris Rickenbaugh, and I am here documenting my journey in real estate and business, and also talking a little bit about travel, hacking, and personal finance. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at leadway.wealth, where you can go give me a follow and stay up to date on what I'm learning, what I'm doing day to day, and pretty much it. So if you're looking for to listen to this podcast, you'll find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and Podbean. So, jumping into it today, it was a little bit slower of a week. Busy day here, and then a little bit slow in different areas. Working on something really cool here, so hopefully soon we'll be able to talk about what I'm doing, talking about purchasing a lot of houses. So, we'll be able to have updates on where those are at. The flips are rolling. It should be a couple weeks away from being complete on at least one of them. And then a few weeks later, we'll be done on the second. And hopefully next Friday, I'll have an update on where our evictions stand. So let's hop into today's topic. So equity, cash flow is the ongoing, never-ending conversation in real estate, and what should you be buying for? So the market is completely different from when I started listening, because they were talking about cash flow, and now it's really hard to find because you're having to do, certain things and basically have a business like Airbnb, like medium-term rentals, different types of housing like pad splits to be able to create the income, and that starts to be a little bit more like active income. So the argument between equity and cash flow really depends on your own position. So let's break them down before we hop into the three different situations. So equity, it's going to be really good for the long haul because you're going to be able to grow with the market. So if you're in a growing market like where I am, you could buy a house right now for $300,000, and then in a couple years, you're probably going to be closer to $400,000 and $500,000 while paying down that mortgage. So it's going to be a really, really good equity play for the long term if you have the money to be able to just hold on and wait. So if you have the money and want to preserve and grow it, I would really be buying for equity, especially if it's not taking anything out of your pocket and you're pretty well set. So cash flow, this is what really gets talked about because this is the very hyped up thing that, gets people out of their jobs. You can buy a couple rentals and, quit your job. So that's just not how it is anymore. And like I said, the way people are getting cash flow now are basically from having a little bit more active income in it. It's not passive. So this will replace more of your active income through your normal W-2 job, but it's not going to be as much unless you get a ton of houses. So different ways to be able to get the cash flow without putting as much money into your pocket is the BRRRR method. So you're going to be doing buy, rehab, rent, refinance it, and then repeating that entire process, because then you could be using somebody else's money to be able to, purchase the house, and then through hard money, you can renovate it and then do a refinance. You may not be able to pull 100% of your money out, but it's going to be a lot better than trying to put 20% down on a property. And then, if you have the 20% down, that's going to be a better way to make it cash flow just because of your numbers. You're going to have to just be paying a little bit lower of a monthly mortgage payment. And then if you have a little bit of money in your pocket, seller financing could be the best way to do this because you're negotiating your own terms, and then you're going to be able to, just negotiate and play it more your way. So the last one here is going to be active income. So this is going to be the fastest way to replace a job. Brian Lubin really talks about this as his strategy is buying businesses, but sticking with real estate, this is going to be flipping, wholesaling, being a real estate agent, or anything that requires you to, be active in your business. So right now, I'm the one that's having to, run to the houses, look at the houses, purchase them, find the money. That's active income because it's not passive whatsoever. If I was doing nothing, I wouldn't be making money. So, that creates a really good argument. And, the best answer between equity and cash flow is it depends. It really depends on what your situation in life is. That's why I wanted to take this little, side route here and not break down cash flow, equity, equity versus cash flow like it was on my TikTok yesterday. But I want to give different situations and what this person could be and should be doing. So let's start out with the person who is just out of college making $40,000 a year, who only has $1,000 saved. So based on that, your $1,000 saved is just, you're going to have to be working a job. You're going to have to be doing something for money coming in to be able to save that money. So what you should be doing at that point is investing a lot into your education. So, YouTube University, there's tons of podcasts out there, basically being able to learn as much as you can. And then your job is going to be finding that active income, because say you're making $40,000 a year and thinking, man, I can't do this for another year or two. What you should be doing is in real estate, you can be helping out flippers, wholesalers, trying to find the active income to be able to replace your job. So when you're right out of college making $40,000 a year, that's going to be way easier than it's going to be a lot easier to be able to replace your income of $40,000 a year with one or two flips rather than just trying to, quit the job, figure it out, and, build or try to save the money for like a 20% down payment. That's going to be near impossible on that job unless you work in it for, 10, 15 years and get promoted and change jobs. So the best way for someone just out of college making $40,000 a year with only $1,000 in their pocket is going to be going down the active income route and seeing, how am I able to earn more money how am I able to replace this $40,000? So that's your number one goal. So that could be easily one or two flips per year. And then let's just say you make $30,000 on each flip and you use private money, someone's rich uncle, and you're able to do that and make $60,000 a year. That replaces it. And then you're off to the races, because you're going to be able to see how much that benefited you. And if you're able to work during that time when you're doing these flips, that's going to be a lot better, because then you made $40,000 from your job and then $60,000 from the real estate, making that $100,000 total. So way easier to replace an income like that for someone just out of college with $1,000 in their pocket. So let's move on to person number 2. So this person, just to set the profile, is going to be about 30 to 40 years old with a job of $80,000 a year with $120,000 saved, probably sitting in a 401k savings account, maybe some index funds, and they're, just looking for something a little bit more, probably have kids on the way, and they just want to earn a little bit more. So with that money in their pocket, they're going to be able to do a little bit more than that person just out of college because of that money saved. It hasn't really accrued yet. They're still just finding, they're just getting settled in that work. So this is where they can focus on cash flow a little bit more, because they're not hell-bent on trying to replace their jobs, but you could easily do that. So with this person, they have enough money to be able to fund their first flip. So like I said, for the last person, they could do 2 to 3 flips a year and easily replace their jobs. And same with this person. So that's where the active income comes in. But if they like their job, you're going to be targeting cash flow a little bit more to where, you could fund your own flip. you could have the people do the work, and then you could rent it and then refinance to where you get all of your money back, and then you have probably a cash flowing rental or just about near, so that you're building that equity. This is where equity comes into play. And then, you're able to, preserve your wealth. So you're going to have, that could easily replace, 80,000, or you could put in $80,000 worth of equity just by refinancing that house and keeping it. And then if you do 2 or 3 of those a year and just keep recycling your money, even if you don't make a ton of money off the refinance, you're going to be building so much equity. And let's just say, for example, you're able to pull 75% out of a house, and that house is worth $400,000. So that 75%, you're going to have $100,000 in each house. Say you do one of those, or let's say 2 or 3 of those a year. Let's say 3. You're going to increase your savings and your equity with $300,000 in 1 year. That's the way to do it if you have a little bit of money, because you don't need to go all in. You don't need to go, replace your job because you don't hate it. But you're able to build those savings, save for future kids or your kids college, and that's going to be able to help you get ahead. So, and you could probably do that with 50 to 60,000, or you could be doing what real estate investors do and raise money. So maybe you bring in a partner to where you go half and half and just cash them out with a little bit of interest. That's another way to do it with, maybe 20 to 25,000. So as you can see, as you keep listening, it really just depends on where you're at in this life. But I did want to bring in one more person. So say this person is 50 plus years old, probably 50 to 60, and they're definitely thinking about retirement at this point and thinking, okay, well, 1 million total probably isn't enough to be able to just retire and sit on the beach. So how do we build this a little bit more? Well, they can take that 1.5 million in equity, or that they've saved. Let's just say they've saved up 1.5 million. It's sitting in different accounts. It could be the stock market. It could be their savings account, or 401ks that have just built up. And it's just sitting there. It's just growing slowly. So this is the person that I would easily recommend building more or being able to do more equity, because at this stage in their life, they're probably pretty settled in their job. They don't want to go out and completely replace their job because, they're set. Getting another, $2,000-$3,000 raise, that's probably not going to be a ton for them, and it's not going to be the motivation, but they don't want to go out and they don't want to flip and wholesale. So the active income is probably out. So, and then the cash flow, this is where they're going to have a little bit more leverage, but they don't want to do too much. They're at this age. It's like, all right, we know this is coming. It's like, let me just preserve my wealth and be able to grow it. So they could do the active income. They could buy for cash flow that replaces it, but they're going to be a little bit more focused on equity. I'm not saying that they can't do any of those active income or buy for cash flow, but just for this example, this person doesn't want to do that. They want it for the long haul. They just want to be able to grow their wealth and buy a couple houses now and then be able to sell one, in the next 5, 7, or 10 years. And, that way that could be their income for the entire year. They could be making $100,000 if they buy one house per year and then sell it within the next 7 or 10 years. I know David Green talks about this. He's like, if you just buy one for the next 15 years and then sell it after year 15 when it's paid off, you're going to be, multi-millionaire. But it's that easy, because at the end of that 15 years, you're going to be able to really start cashing out on properties to where if you put it on that 15-year mortgage, it's going to be completely paid off. So think about a $300,000 house, in 15 years, that's going to be paid off. It's going to be appreciated. And then you could sell one for the next 15 years and be set for life. So This person could easily do that at this point to where they buy 1, maybe 2 houses a year. They're buying for the equity. It's not going to hurt their cash flow. They're able to put a little bit more down than that person who had only $120,000 saved. And then, they're just going to sit and watch it grow. They're going to retire at 65. And then they're going to have these couple of houses that they can then start selling. If they put it on that 15-year note, they could sell one each year and then be set for the rest of their life. So, that was 3 different situations that I wanted to be able to walk through, because equity versus cash flow, it's not a hard line. You just need to be aware of what your situation is and then be able to go where you want to go. So it's easier to set that destination, set that goal, figure out what you really want to do in life, and then the how is going to be able to figure itself out. So I just want to present a couple of those options here on the podcast. I'm that person who was recently out of college making $40,000 a year. And then at my sales job, I was, it wasn't really sales, but, basically no savings and making less than $40,000 a year, probably closer to $25,000. And then I said, all right, well, we got to figure out this real estate thing. And then I went straight into it, which is what I'm doing now with the active income and flipping houses. And, with this deal we're about to do, it's going to be able to create a good chunk of money to be able to start looking at doing the cash flow. So that's what I wanted to be able to break down today. But if you're still listening, thank you for listening to the Leadway Wealth Builders podcast. My name is Chris Rickenbaugh, and you just listened to episode 129, and we will see you on the next one.